Hi everybody, I'm Mislav and I'm not Stefan, obviously. Aw. I'm a web dev slash team lead and anything in between, and I'm in this line of work for the past about 10 years. Currently I'm working with a small company called Genkov from New York, and if you want to talk to me about my current work, about genome sequencing and other sciencey stuff, you can find me afterwards because this talk has nothing to do with it. So this talk was in the making in my head for the past 2 years, but it's a struggle I'm dealing with most of my development career. Ever since I started writing code, I was always looking that my code isn't just beautiful from a machine perspective, that it can be run efficiently, but also beautiful from like a bird's eye view when somebody's actually reading it. Okay, maybe that wasn't true for my first Pascal programs back in the day, but definitely it was true for my first HTML pages written like 16 or 17 years ago. And those were troubling times to do development back in the day, especially from a small backwater village in Zagreb. I mostly learned from one crappy book I actually borrowed. It looks something like this. I have no idea where my original book is, but it's not too far off. It was confusing time because HTML4 was out and XHTML1 was out. You were supposed to use CSS now for everything, including layouts, but maybe still tables for layouts, but definitely not tables for layouts. And I had no mentor. I only had this one book, and I had internet, but I had crappy dial-up internet. And I used to connect, open up a bunch of pages, save them one way or another, then disconnect and read through the materials I opened. Browsing forums like mi3.org was especially fun. And it was especially expensive. My parents were not happy, and at one point to actually try to mitigate the problem, I just wasn't sleeping through the night. The pages I downloaded, often I didn't just use them as a reading material, often I used them to actually open them up and see how they are built. At first, I used Macromedia Dreamweaver because that was the best advice I got from the internet. And luckily, after some time, I actually found Notepad++ that I installed from a bug CD. I was changing stuff around, opening my local pages in my browser. Of course, it was IE6. And I pressed F5 endlessly. And more often than not, I was horrified how badly the pages were structured, how difficult it is for me to read actual code. But one page was different than all the others. So the CSS Zen Garden website was created in 2003, and it was created as a sort of a demonstration to show what can be done through pure CSS-based design. The idea was that you take this page, exactly this page's HTML, and try to create something completely different without changing a single HTML element and only do CSS. And with CSS Zen Garden, it wasn't only the pages and the design that were beautiful, it was the code as well. Everything was structured neat and clean. HTML was readable. CSS was grouped in meaningful ways. I could read even the most complex examples because the authors made sure that the code has a certain flow to it. So I started to read a lot about code styles, and throughout time I made a bunch of my own rules, and I was always busy adjusting them. And list of my rules grew and grew. And then I came to college, and in my college days, well, let's face it, college is time to experiment, to do some crazy things, right? So in my college days, I did some PHP. And with group projects, I was always the guy who was saying that white space is important, that functions are supposed to be written as camel case, variables as snake case, and other stuff like that. Looking at it now, I don't even know if it makes sense. But it made sense to me, and apparently I was doing very anal and very, sometimes even rude code review before I even knew what a code review was. Fast forward a few years, and I'm doing Python. Life is good because we have PEP 8. So I'm using it, and most of my team members and colleagues I'm working with are not. And they're not wrong. Sometimes PEP 8 produces unreadable code, totally unreadable. Then I'm digging in deeper, what else there is, and then there's a bunch of other tools like PyChecker, PyLint, PyFlakes, and so many possible rules can be set. And even when the team decides to use them and they are written in either some README or a wiki or a special document that outlines like a guideline how to write the code, nobody is actually writing by those rules. And let me tell you, if those rules are not automatically enforced, they're probably not happening. And here enters the first line of defense. The pre-commit. Pre-commit is a framework for managing and maintaining multi-language pre-commit hooks. So this is a talk that's mostly focused around Python, but it works also with other languages. Hooks are small scripts that are run on every commit to automatically point out issues in code, and in some examples, they actually can modify the code if it's safe to do so. For an example, let's say you are creating a static web page, so you only have your CSS, HTML, and JS. But you want to use a linter that is written in Ruby, of course, and you don't want to maintain your own gem file and stuff like that. You can use pre-commit framework and just add it as a check. And pre-commit framework actually installs and runs that pre-commit check, the linter, on every and each commit. Hooks are defined, as I said, in a simple YAML file. This is a short example. And they are run on every commit, and this is the output. This is an example for one of my Python projects that I'm working on. And since I was already talking about code style, I'm going to start with that one. There's no question about the usefulness of readable code formatting, and while it doesn't change the semantics of the code, it simplifies maintenance. From my perspective, there are two major benefits to automatic code formatting. First is from an individual point of view. You no longer have to constantly think and weigh in, how am I going to write this? And be that based on some rules or on personal taste or a mix of both. Just throw your code into a tool and let the formatter do everything for you. Until you try this, you have no idea how much this unclutters your mind. Sorry. The other benefit is, of course, from a team perspective. Team members, when they are doing a code review, they actually no longer have to think about something simple as code formatting, because whatever the formatter did is the expected result. No question about it. This removes the thought of, I would have formatted this a bit differently while reviewing code, as well in the same way it removes how do I actually format this when writing the code. So I touched upon PEP 8 already. It's often presented as the usual path because it was given to us by the great Guido himself. And throughout years, I realized that most of the people in Python community are actually not using it. But if you are in a team that is using it, just add it as a pre-commit hook. Currently, the tool that does the auto-formatting according to PEP 8, as crazy as it looks, is called PyCode style. I wasn't the only one, I guess, who had problems with formatting in Python and with PEP 8. Google had it too. And just to make it clear how this formatting issue in Python was well known and widespread, YAP stands for Yet Another Python Formatter. It's often considered the sane alternative to PEP 8, and it's highly configurable, which is a good thing, but also a bad thing, because you keep on adding new rules and new rules. So if you keep your rules minimal, you should be safe. But most of the projects I've seen, they don't do that. In regard with formatting, we have the newest contender in Python market. It's called Black, and it's very similar to Go FMT from Golang, that it's actually intentionally not very configurable with a bunch of sane defaults. Currently, a bunch of famous, so to speak, open source projects are using it, be it PyTest, Tox, Hypothesis, Django, SQL Alchemy, and a bunch of others, smaller ones. It's the first officially endorsed project by the Python Software Foundation that actually didn't come from the Python team itself. And it's also a project endorsed by me because it's worry-free. You don't have to worry about formatting one bit. Next, we have a bunch of quick and easy checks that I'm just going to go through that actually help you write valid code, be it when you're writing want to write valid Python, Bash scripts, Ruby, buildable Go, of course, JS, TypeScript, you name it. We can check for .strict existence, debug statements, merge conflict strings, which often happens, let's face it, trailing white spaces and end-of-file white spaces. And of course, because we all have these types of files in our repos, if we have valid JSON, valid YAML, TOML, or XML. A fast check is also sort of import sorting. In Python Word, it's pretty normal to actually put like system imports on top, then third-party libraries, and then your own imports at the end. And if you have a tool for this, you don't have to sort it on your own. Just when you're writing it, write it whatever you want and let the tool sort it out properly. Another fast one is dependency sorting. We have a requirements file in Python world, and this is an example of neatly automatically sorted requirements file for test suite. There are a bunch of other possible checks that can be run through pre-commit. Some are specific to Python, but as I said, there's also others for other languages as well, for PHP, for whatever. So here we come to the second line of defense, and that is your CI. And all of you have it, hopefully. What I'm explaining here can be actually done either with Jenkins, Travis, GitLab CI, GoCD, Circle CI, you name it. And the first job I actually always add to my project as a CI job is actually I run all those pre-commit hooks again. And yes, everybody on your team should be already doing it locally anyway, because they set up the project correctly. but you never know what happened. Maybe they reinstalled their machine. Maybe somebody is doing a commit straight from the GitHub UI, whatever. Doesn't matter, you have a check, and you don't want to be the guy pulling their sleeve and saying like, this should have looked differently. But there are also certain things that, let's face it, take too long to actually be run as a pre-commit. With a bunch of long checks, you would actually discourage your devs from committing often, and then you have a whole new problem on your hands. So keep some checks exclusively in the CI. The most obvious one is coverage decrease. It can happen for multiple reasons. Be it the most obvious one, somebody just actually didn't write the test for something they newly created. Somebody removed something they thought was an obsolete test, or something silly like somebody named their test method the same way an existing one is named. Again, this happens all the time, and you don't want to be the boring guy who goes through the CI logs and there's like a one line missing and then referencing that into your code review. Let the tool do it for you. Prospector is like a Swiss Army knife in Python world. It's excellent for detecting like unused imports, cyclic imports that can easily happen, unreachable code, dead code, loose debug statements, and a bunch of other things like if you have like some secure string that you're not supposed to have, like password straight up in your code. It packs in PyLint, PyFlakes, Py.style, Maccabi, which is actually a complexity checker, which checks if your function is trying to do a whole bunch of things and not a single thing it's supposed to. And Dodgy, as I said, sensitive string check. And some of you might think, but my IDE already does that. Sure, yours does, but not every team member uses the same tool to write the code. So just use the tool and use the CI check. Bandit is an excellent tool for doing check for common security issues when you're writing Python code. I'm not getting into that one too much because it's a whole separate talk. We have finally static typing in Python. It's optional, but if you are using it, you should use it properly and check if you are using it properly. I'm also doing some DevOps stuff. So I like to check if my Docker files are written correctly. And if you are writing Docker files and have them in your repo, use the linter, because your ops team will hate you just a tiny bit less. I also have some Terraform in there, so I use classic stuff for like if it's valid formatting and if it can actually be run. And regarding to formatting, I actually run the format check as a pre-commit as well, but validate takes a long time, so I run it only in the CI. And sure, there's a bunch of other. Again, I only have 5 minutes. So now there's a question where to start. All I'm saying is sounds nice and easy when you are doing greenfield development from a new project. But let's face it, most of you want to know how to do this on like a 10-year-old legacy project. So let's start with simple formatting. Be it linting or import sorting or anything that is not actually doing anything with the logic of the code, I suggest 2 options. One is formatting in one single commit. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. You do it and be done with it. Of course, your Git history is like not the prettiest at this moment because everything is done like in a single commit. The last thing, but you can live with it. And the other way to do it is the Boy Scout rule. like everything you touch, you leave it just a tiny bit better than you found it. Let's say you're working on logic.py, and you only have like one line fix in some function deep within that logic.py. Reformat and fix that whole function and do some import sorting properly and stuff like that. Just leave stuff nicer than you found it. With checks, add it as a job to the CI, but first, I suggest adding it as a job that can actually fail, because whichever tool you're going to use, it's probably going to fail. And hopefully, the psychological effect of this exclamation mark and this, be it red or orange or whatever, should encourage your team members to actually slowly fix it and turn it into a green check. And once it turns green and it's established as a common practice, make that CI step an obligatory one that will actually break your whole pipeline. Down the line, all the checks that you use, you should add them in your project gradually and add them as sort of a democratic process. And that's how I was adding them. Have a discussion with your team. Don't make the decision as an autocratic one, like, let's just use this and be done with it. No. Discussion still needs to happen. And just see what works for you and your team. And whatever you do, just stop wasting time going in circles and always having the same old comments in your reviews and change requests that could and should be automated. That's it.
We have a few minutes for questions.
One question which came to mind is, do you know the EditorConf initiative, which is becoming more popular, which is about standard...
Sorry, can you...
The EditorConf file and initiative, which is some kind of simple file.
Yeah.
Do you know any pre-commit hooks that actually are using this EditorConf file?
Actually, I don't, because I don't use the editor file, so I didn't have to, but on the pre-commit... okay, yeah, my talk is live, and it's actually, you can go to it through the joined in page and click on the links. So the pre-commit homepage of the framework has like 200 or 300 pre-commit hooks, and some of those packages have like within them like 5 or 10 possible. So yeah, I bet there is one. There is a pre-commit hook to do that, I bet, yeah.
I have one question.
Okay.
Oh, well, where did you see? Oh, thank you.
So I saw that example to run pre-commit, like pre-commit run all code or how it went. Did it impact like the build times? So for larger projects, does it take time? Can it be incorporated into the build and not to increase its time? So what is the impact on the build time?
Of course it does, as every job. But I have, if you are using anything modern, you can actually parallelize the jobs anyway. So I have a bunch of checks, be them, I have actually, all those checks are actually the pre-commit check in the CI, Terraform validate check, and bandit check, and prospector check. They'll all run in parallel, and then I actually start running the test suite. So I'm not losing any time by running this this job. I'm just paying more. That's it. But yeah, I mean, it's like in parallel, it's run. This job is run 2 minutes, and okay, you run it 10, 20, 30 times a day. In the end, it's not that horrible. Yeah.
Okay, that's all the time you have. So thank you, Mislav.
Thank you.